Hello everyone, in this tutorial we will see how can we schedule a task in our Django REST framework API and get it to run in the background. And there are a lot of use cases for that. One of them is, let's say you want to send a newsletter to your users or to your subscribers every week. Okay, you can do that. Let's say you want to back up your database or your data every day at maybe certain time. You can do that. Another use case for that is connecting to an external services or APIs to collect some data and then maybe store it in our database or use it for some other functionalities. And this is what we're going to do in this tutorial in order to see how schedule works. So for that I created an application inside our project and I named it weather using Python manage.py start app weather. And what we need this application to do is to connect to external API that holds weather data, fetch this data and store it in our database so we can use it in our own way in the future. So basically, if we go to the models.py, I created a model here. I named it forecast. It has a simple 4 fields, which is the timestamp, temperature, description and city. So we'll be getting the temperature and the description of the weather for a specific city. Okay, and in the views.py I simply created a view set, a weather view set that will serve the requests through the URL, which is weather /data, because I added here in the root urls.py. So this is it here, it's included. And in the serializer I added a serializer for that model that will help us serialize the data. So at this stage we'll be able to communicate with this application, save data or get data. And if I run the server now, obviously guys, after you create this, please run make migrations and then migrate and then run the server. I did that already, so I'm just gonna run the server. And I'll wait for the server to run. Then I'm gonna go to the Postman, and if I perform a GET request, I'll see I still have nothing in the database. So we're not gonna store anything in the database manually. We'll just handle this through our scheduled function, which will go and get the data from the weather API and then store it in the database. Then we'll be able to see it here when we perform a GET request. And for that I'm going to use a service called let me just open the browser. It's called Open Weather Map, and this will give me an API endpoint where I can use to get the weather data of a specific city. So after you sign up for this, I'll leave a link in the description for this website. After you sign up here, you will get an API key which will allow you to perform the requests. Obviously there's a limit for how many requests you make per minute, but you can also buy one of their plans. It's a very nice service. So here I can see here the APIs or API call. And what's the requirement here? The requirement here is, for example, the city name and the API key, or the city name, the state code, and API key. And that's what I'm going to use. So first I'm going to try to do a request using Postman and see what type of data I can get from this API. So let's do that. So this is the API that I'm going to use. I'm going to use the weather of London, and then I provided the key for the API, and then I'm just going to send a GET request. And as you see here, I get a lot of data about the weather. So I'm going to choose some of these fields here or objects to store in our database, which is, for example, the city, the temperature, and the description. So I'll get the description from here, and the city name from here, and I'll get the temperature from here. Okay, so it's in Fahrenheit. We can easily, transfer it or convert it into Celsius. It's fine. So this is what I'm going to get from this API. And the next step is to find a way to perform a GET request to this API inside a function in our view, and then take the response, extract the data from it, and then save it in our database. So let's do that. So if we go back to VS Code, inside our, I'm going to do it inside views.py. You can do it however you want. You can add these functions, but I don't want you guys to get confused in case you're using ModelViewSet before to serve your application, and then you want to add this functionality to your API. Then you can do it within your view class. You don't have to add extra files and other stuff. So for doing the requests, let's cancel or close the server. We need to install requests package. So it's pip install requests. That will help us to perform requests to APIs. And after that, inside our views.py, we need to import requests. I already imported here. The next thing we need to do is declare a function inside our view set. Let's name it, for example, get weather data. And this is going to be a private function. So we'll pass self here, and inside here, let's declare a variable called URL, and this will be the URL for our call. And then let's use requests to perform a GET request to this URL. So let's declare another variable. Let's name it API requests equal requests that we imported dot get, and then we'll pass the URL, and then we'll check if the request is successful. Then we'll return the response data. If not, we'll return none. So we'll wrap this in a try except. So here we'll say API request dot raise for status. This function will tell us if the request was successful, and if yes, then we'll return API requests dot JSON. If not, we'll just return none. Okay. None. So let's add the URL here. I'm just gonna copy it from our request here and the postman. Obviously you can make this dynamic, but for the purpose of this tutorial I'm just going to keep it static. So instead of putting this as a static here inside inside the URL, you can just make it as a variable, and then the key as well, and then you can use .format to insert this variable into the URL string. The next thing we need to do is extract the data that we need from the API response and then save it into our database. So to do that, let's declare a function or a method, and we'll name it save data and or save weather data, and this will take self as an argument, and then inside this method we will say, for example, weather data equals, we will call the private function get weather data, and then we will check if the response is not none. So if weather data is not none, then what we'll do, we'll wrap this in a try except, and then we'll create a new object of the data. So we'll say weather object, for example, equals we'll take the forecast model name dot objects dot create, and then we'll pass the fields or the key value of the fields that we have in our model. So we'll start by the temperature, which is equal the weather data, and then if we check the response here, so the temperature is within the main, so it's going to be weather data main then temp. Okay, so we'll do that, main and then temp. The next argument will be the description, so equals weather data, and let's check the response again. The description is within the weather, so weather is the list, so we'll take the first list, which is 0, then we'll take description. So it's going to be like this, weather data 0, then description. The last argument is the city, so city will be, let's check, will be just the name. Okay, so it's in this object, it's represented by the key name, so I'll just add weather data name, and that should work. And then after that we will save this object, so weather data dot save, and then we'll say accept. We're not going to do anything, we'll just pass. Okay, so when we call this function, what will happen, or this method, what will happen is this method will call the get weather data, and then this method will return a response with the weather data. We'll extract it and save it in the database. The next thing we need to do is to set up the scheduler. So to do that, first I'm going to install the AP scheduler. So I'm going to use pip install AP scheduler. After that, I'm going to create a folder inside the weather application, and I will name it weather schedule. And inside this folder, I'm going to add a new file, which is the init file.py, which is going to allow us to see this folder as a module where we can import inside our files. So the other file that I need to create here, I'll name it, for example, updater or weather updater .py. Inside weather updater, I'm gonna first import the background scheduler from AP scheduler. So I'm gonna do that now. So from AP scheduler dot schedulers dot background import background scheduler. And then I want to use the schedule to run the save weather data inside our view set. So the weather view set. So I need to import that here. So let me import from weather app dot views import weather view set. And after that, I'm going to declare a function, and I'll name it, you can name it whatever you want. I'll name it start, for example, to start the schedule. So I'm going to declare this function, so start, and inside this function I'll first get an instant of the background schedule. So I'll just say scheduler equals background scheduler, and then I'll also get an instant of the weather view set. So I'll just say weather equals weather view set. So after we initialize the scheduler here, we need to assign or add a job to the scheduler. And to do that, we can simply say scheduler dot add job, and then inside here we'll specify the function that we need to execute, and which is the weather dot save data. And then after that, we'll specify the trigger for the job. And the AP schedule has three types of triggers: interval, date, and count. So the interval will allow us to execute a function or execute a job in a specific interval time, okay? Like every 5 minutes, every 3 minutes, 2 minutes, every 30 minutes, it doesn't matter. The date will allow us to execute this job in specific date, okay, that we specify. The count will allow us to perform or execute the job periodically in a specific time of the day. So we're gonna go for the interval for now, and I'll leave a link in the description for the documentation. You must check it out if you want to know more or get to use more functionality with the scheduler. Definitely there are a lot to know there and it's pretty interesting. So let's choose the interval, and then after that we need to specify the interval value. So for now I want it to be like 2 minutes, so we'll type minutes equals 2, and then we need to give this job an ID. So we'll just say ID equal, for example, weather 001. And then one more thing we need to add to prevent the schedule from creating a copy of the job each time the application restarts. We can simply add replace existing true. So that's for adding the job. After that, we can simply say schedule dot start to start the schedule. So this is the main setup, okay, for the schedule. And now that we configured the scheduler, we need to call the start function when the application runs in order to get the schedule to start. So in order to do that, we will go to the apps.py inside our application, and inside the weather class we need to, or the weather config class, we need to declare a method called ready, and this method will get called when the application is running and ready. So inside here we need to first import the weather updater. So what we're going to do is we're going to say from weather scheduler import weather updater, and then we can call the start function, so weather updater dot start. And I'm gonna add a print statement here just to show you guys when it's getting called. So I'm gonna say print, and then here I'm just gonna say for example launching or starting scheduler. Okay, so this will run or will get called when the application runs and is ready. So the start function inside the weather updater will get called, and that will start our scheduler. Okay, let's run the server and see how it's gonna go. So I'm gonna just type here python manage.py run server. Or before that, I just want to see when we get the response from the API. So I'm going to add a print statement inside our views as well. So here I'm going to print the weather data. We will see it in the terminal when we get weather data, and yeah, that should be okay. And inside the weather updater, I think I'm gonna put this into 1 minute just to make it faster and save it. And now we can run the server. And it's telling me the no module name weather scheduler. So okay, let's just go to the apps.py, just add a dot here to tell it to get it from the root directory. Okay, I have another error here that says background schedule. Oh, okay, I misspelled this, so it's background and here as well. Okay, now that the server is running, we should get a response from the weather API within the interval that we set here in our scheduler, and then after that response get received, the function inside views.py should extract the data from it and then save it in our database. And after that we should perform a GET request to the endpoint of our application and be able to see some objects as a response. So as you see guys, here we get a response back from the API, and this response has the data that we wanted. So let's perform a GET request and see if the data got saved. And we see that we have no data. So let's check why. So I'm going to close the server and go back to views.py and see if I did extract the data correctly. So this main temperature, so it's main temperature, and then the second argument is the description, which is weather data. Oh, okay, I think I made a mistake here, because it's weather data, weather, then the description. So I need to add this here. Okay, so I'm gonna add this here, save it, and then rerun the server. One thing guys we need to note here, as you see I have starting schedule twice, and we need to avoid that. And the reason why that's happening, because when we run the server again, it creates another instance of our application or project. So in order to avoid that, we need to add the no reload after run server. So that should do it. So now we should see only one starting scheduler, and then we will wait until we get the response from the API and see if the data gets saved. And here we go guys, we got our first response from the weather API, and now let's check if the data was saved. So I'm going to perform a GET request to the link, and as you see here we have our first object saved. So that's cool. Let's wait for another response and see if another object will get saved. And I chose to save or create an object every time we receive a new response. We can also update the existing object or the existing table in our database as well. So this is up to you guys. So I received another response here, so I'm gonna send another request, and as you see guys, I have two objects now. So it's pretty cool that we managed to do this in the background without having to call this function every time we needed to update our weather data in our database. And there are many use cases for this, and I highly recommend guys that you check the documentation. I'm going to leave a link in the description for that, so you can learn more about schedule. So that's it guys for this tutorial. Hope you learned something new, and if so, please hit the like button, that helps the channel. And if you're looking forward for more content like this, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. And until the next one.